Hey there, welcome to my studio here in New York City. I'm Daniel Norton, this is Marissa. In this video, we're going to talk about setting lighting ratios. This is a question I get all the time whenever I'm doing live streams. People are like, what's your ratio? We'll talk about it a little bit. I personally do not like to use typical ratios, and I'll kind of explain how I set up my light and how I balance it, and we'll go from there. But let's just talk about what a ratio is. Ratio is basically the ratio of your light to dark, right? So if you're looking at a light and you want to put a fill light in, right? If you do a 1-to-1 ratio, so they're the same power basically, or same exposure, I should say, then you would have a flat light with no shadow at all. 1 to 2, you'd have stop darker shadows. 1 to 4, you'd have 2, exactly. So you just keep going like that. So let's start though here. First, I'm going to show you how to do it with TTL, which is how a lot of people are going to operate these days. So I have my one Profoto light set up here in my A group. This is going to be my key light. It is a B10 in a small Schmear softbox. We've got Marissa here. She's going to look slightly that way. I'm in TTL, so I'm going to set this up, and I'm going to make the first shot. So now we have a shot with some nice shadow here, and perhaps that's too dark. You want a little bit more light in the shadows. You want to bring that in to get more detail there. So we're going to bring a fill light in. This fill light is going to be this 2x3 softbox from Profoto. Now, I generally like to use a large fill light because you don't want your fill light to be hard unless if your main light is soft. So generally speaking, you're going to want your fill light to be bigger than your key. I know some people like to put a flash on top of their camera, Seth, and use that as a fill, and it works. But if you don't get it exactly right, you will get double shadows that are very noticeable. So you're safer using a bigger source. Okay, so this is in my B group. So there's two ways to do this. I'm going to do it the more manual way, if you will, because I want to show you how it's done. I'm going to turn off the light in my A group, and I'm going to make a shot with just the B light. Now this should, assuming it gives me a proper exposure. Yeah, okay. So now, right, it's lit. That's broad lighting, by the way. It's lit from the front. That's a proper exposure, okay? So if I were to turn my A light back on, and I'm going to turn to manual now so nothing changes, and I make a photo, this here is going to be a 1-to-1 ratio, or flat lighting. That's very flat lighting. Flat lighting is great for some stuff. It can kind of hide shadow, wrinkles and stuff, you know? That's why people like ring lights. So a ring light is basically creating its own fill. But most of us want some depth and shadow, so what we can do now is, I'm already set here. So if I want a 1-to-2 ratio, right, I will take my B light, which is this one, and I'm just going to now, I'm in manual, I'm just going to turn it down one stop. So now my main light is twice as bright as my fill light. This is a 1-to-2 ratio. Okay, you can see now we've got some modeling, some shape, but it's still flattering, still shows all the detail. This is very commercial, right? If you want 1-to-4 power-wise, we're going to move it down 2 more stops, right? Because each time you drop the light, you need to do it 2. So we'll go down. So now we're a total of 3 stops difference, but this is actually should be like a 1-to-4 ratio, if I'm doing my math right. It's been a long time since I've had 5th grade math. Okay, so now we're in a spot where our fill light is roughly 3 stops under our key light, and we can see that this is a 1-to-4 ratio. We're starting to get some depth in it. And again, you just keep doubling it each time. So that right there is the way that I like to do it. Set everything up flat and evenly and do it. Now there is another way to do this, which is to simply switch to TTL. We've got 2 lights going on here. We take the B light and we just set it at, oh no, that's plus. We set it at minus, in this case, this only goes to -2, so we'll set it at -2. So now we're basically telling the TTL exposure that every time it measures its exposure, that it should expose properly with the one light, and then the second light should give two stops less light. So let's see what that looks like. Right, and that brings us back. Also looks good and did a great job. Now, the advantage of doing it this way is that if the subject's moving around and stuff, it will continue to keep remeasuring the exposure, adjusting as need be, right? She gets close to the light, she gets further away from the light, that kind of stuff. The disadvantage is that the exposure is going to change, right? So sometimes we want a fixed exposure because we might want to do all our post-processing in batches. So we want the manual setting. Otherwise, you can just do it right here in the TTL. And it's nice and simple. If you wanted it to be even more contrasty, I could take the A light, let's say for instance, and I could turn it up half a stop. So now it's going to give us an overexposed key light, like a little bit bright, and an underexposed shadow or fill light, and that's going to give us even a slightly different ratio, right? So now we've got a little more contrast because now we're a little bit brighter in our key light than the TTL thinks it should be, and our shadows are 2 stops under. Nice and simple. That's a good place to start. So if you're wondering, I'm making a portrait, where's a good place to put my fill light? Generally 2 to 3 stops under is where I would start. That usually gives you a nice ratio where you get shadow, but at the same time, you've still got detail in it. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know how you guys like to set up your lights as far as the ratios. And I'll put Marissa's information in the description. You guys can follow her. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so that you get notifications. And I'll see you next time.